Grüß, willkommen in einem aufregendes Video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 53 of my Figure Gaming video series. This video is designed to assist players to construct a micro-armour force mix for the year 1939, using either squad, platoon or company scale rules. In this video I'll be covering the French forces. This video is designed to provide a force mix for any set of rules. However, different rules will require some minor adjustments to any force mix. For example, Panzer Corps allows you to deploy platoon-sized support elements, even though it is a company scale set of rules. That is, one company equals one element. I'll attempt to cover most of the common differences. Should be noted this guide is not suitable for Flames of War, as these rules have reduced focus on historical accuracy and more on playability. Regardless, those rules have excellent guides which players can use instead. At squad scale, I'm using micro-armour the game, World War II, as my guide for this video. However, rules such as Blitzkrieg Commander 2nd Edition, Main Panzer and Battle Group by Ian S. Clarke should all be easily able to use the force mixes provided. At platoon scale, my guideline set of rules are Spearhead, but other rules such as Combat HQ, Kampfgruppen Kommando and Combined Arms should all be able to use the force mix guides. Rules such as s3e53 use special combat team elements which need to be accommodated for, but as long as you understand this, the rules can also use the force mixes. At a company scale, that is one company equals one element, my main guide is LWRS or the reformatted version Bewaffnungskrieg, but Panzer Corps can easily use the suggested force mixes provided in this video. When creating force mixes, we need to start with the parent formation, which in this case of the French would be their Division Légère de Mercure. My apologies for my French. Specifically the 1st Division Légère de Mercure. Most players would gravitate to the Divisional Cuirassiers de Reserve, so they could field Char B tanks. But I find the DLM a more well-rounded formation, and with what I consider is the better all-round tank, the S-35 medium tank. Players can, of course, choose the DCR instead if they so desire. The defence forces would obviously come from the infantry divisions. In this case, I'm using an A-series infantry division. Players may choose a B-series, which allows them more elements at a lower quality or morale rating, but I find the A-series has more anti-tank and anti-aircraft weapons. Fielding a defensive force depends on what style of scenario you wish to play. Meeting engagement between equal forces provide a less than satisfactory game, so a better scenario has unequal forces meeting each other, which means you need a defending force. While you could use your attacking force mix in defence, in practice, this may not be wise and may leave you at a severe disadvantage as it's not optimised for defence. The other issue is the best scenario has a counter-attack which occurs in the second half of the game, so your attacking force mix will be used there. Using a squad scale set of rules, that's one element equals a squad, a player will need to deploy a battalion, both a defensive infantry battalion and an offensive mechanised battalion. In most cases, a player will need a battalion headquarters and from 2 to 3 company headquarters for both the defensive and offensive force mix. I like to make these elements interesting by including a staff car, truck, horse or other transport figure on it, with 2 figures for the company headquarters element and 3 on a battalion headquarters. Heroic and Ross sells 6 command figures for 60p, with 3 packs meeting all your requirements. Most squad scale sets of rules do not cover any air-to-air combat, thus there may be no need to purchase any fighters, but as they may be used in a platoon and company scale rules, I'd consider it nonetheless. You can also consider an observation aircraft, as some rules do deal with observation. Heroic and Ross offers aircraft from £1.25p to £1.50p each. There's a wide range of French aircraft, with the MB-210 being a good option as a ground support aircraft. The Breguet 19 from Heroic and Ross is a suitable observation aircraft. GHQ offers aircraft in packs of 2 for $11.95 for the pack of 2. Only the MS-406 is available. The French fielded, in most parts, a 75mm gun. In addition, the Divisional possesses 105mm howitzers or guns, and 155 howitzers and guns, strangely enough. At this scale, it would be rare for the 155 howitzers or guns to be fielded. GHQ offers the 75mm and 105mm howitzer for $11.95 for a pack of 2, which includes mounts, which may be all that you require for this scale. Heroic and Ross offers these weapons, except for the 155 howitzer, for 65p each. They also offer the tractors for 65p each. The French possess two types of 25mm anti-tank guns and the older 47mm anti-tank gun. Two of each is all a player would ever need. The French fielded a 25mm and a 37mm anti-aircraft gun, although these were not very common. The bulk of French anti-aircraft capacity was machine gun based. GHQ offers the 25mm and 47mm anti-tank in packs of two, including tractor, for $11.95 US each. Unfortunately, I was unable to locate any French anti-aircraft weapons, so players would need to find something as close as possible. They are so rare that players may not actually need to deploy any. GHQ being of high quality but costly, and Heroic and Ross being much cheaper but lower quality, I tend to use Heroic and Ross for towed guns, including tractors and crews as required, or adding them. I tend to make my off-playing area artillery as attractive as possible, often including the tractor and crew. As they are deployed off the playing area, the base depth is not a major issue, so players can go crazy. Engineers at this scale are optional, and I've had no reason to ever field them. They would be infantry elements with figures doing engineering activities on them if you did wish to field them. There are no French engineers from Heroic and Ross, so you may need to source figures from the British or even Germans, conducting mine clearance, flamethrowers, infantry with satchel charges, pole charges, and infantry with anti-tank mines. Engineers would normally be transported in larger trucks. I would tend to give them a miss at this scale, but players may wish to become a bit creative and make some interesting engineered diorama if they so desire. The French have a good range of tanks to choose from, but all you need are S-35s. Players could also purchase H-35s or H-39s, as well as a low number of AMR ZTs or Panhard 178 armoured cars. But these would be optional, I'll not include them. GHQ's offers 5 of these tanks for $11.95 US each. Heroic and Ross offers these tanks for 50p each. I tend to go with GHQ here, as you don't get many tanks and getting the best quality is a good idea. At this scale, the French would field about 16 motorised infantry elements, 2 81mm mortar elements and 4 MMG elements. Each infantry element should consist of 4 figures, so this represents 72 infantry figures. Players need to determine how they wish to mount their own infantry, but this is, I think, a good guide. The big question is the trucks. Many players do not bother to purchase any trucks at this scale, as the troops are normally dismounted when they enter the playing area. For heavy weapons, I mount a weapon with 3 or 4 figures around it. If the weapon is obviously a heavy weapon, 3 figures is all you need. If not, then I would use 4, which allows you to quickly identify a heavy weapons element. Heroic and Ross sells 50 infantry figures for £4 and 50 heavy weapon figures for £4. Heroic and Ross also sells trucks for 65p per vehicle. For the defensive forces, the infantry would field 2 infantry companies, each of which would consist of 14 infantry elements and a 60mm mortar element. The battalion would field 4 MMG elements, 1 60mm mortar element and 2 81mm mortar elements. At this point, you should have a force mix which will allow you to play as an attacker or defender in a game which you would expect to complete in a day. If you select all the tank options and transports, you'll end up with a force mix consisting of about 160 elements. If you only select one tank option and purchase almost none of the transports, this will drop to about 80 elements. Using a platoon scale set of rules, that's 1 platoon equals 1 element, a player will need to deploy a brigade or regiment, although rarely a full-strength brigade/regiment. A player will need a defensive infantry regiment and an offensive tank or mechanised regiment or brigade. For headquarters, in most cases a player will need a brigade or regimental headquarters, and from 2 to 3 battalion headquarters. You can use the same headquarter elements you selected for the squad scale set of game, except it's very rare to have a 3rd battalion. At platoon scale, it's possible rules will cover air-to-air combat, which would require you to purchase fighters. If you are playing an attack and counter-attack scenario, you may require even more fighters. This is because the defender will normally field 2 to 3 fighters, and a counter-attack force will probably add another 2 to 3 fighters and 2 to 3 light bombers. I would select a range of different fighter types just for a bit of variety. Observation aircraft are more common at this scale, and you only need really one. Your aircraft range could also include some 2-engine bombers as well, but I must admit it's not historically common at this scale. Although I must admit the French did launch a couple of air-to-ground assaults using two-engine bombers, so maybe it's not such a wild card in this particular case. The French fielded two types of field artillery, the 10.5cm and 15cm howitzer, or 105 and 150mm, which would typically be off the playing area. At this scale, it would be rare for the 150mm to be fielded on the playing area or fielded at all. You can use the squad scale force mix in this case. As with the artillery, the anti-aircraft figures would be more common at this scale, although more 25mm anti-tank guns would typically be used than the squad scale set of rules. You would almost certainly be deploying some anti-aircraft guns at this scale as well. Once again, the force mix you've selected for squad scale is more than adequate at this scale. Engineers at this scale are more common, and players should consider purchasing some figures to represent engineers. It is also more common to use transporting trucks at this scale, especially if you intend to have a game with a lot of movement. At this scale, you would typically field a lot more tanks in total numbers, and they would be different tanks. Thus, you'll need 3 or 4 types of tanks: 14 AMR-35s, 7 Samoa S-35s, and 7 H-39s or H-35s is a reasonable guide. GHQ offers all these vehicles for 5 vehicles per packet for $11.95 US per packet. For the motorised formation or the attacker formation, you would deploy 2 motorised battalions with a 81mm auto element at regimental level. The infantry are transported by motorcycles and trucks. This shows just one of the 2 battalions. For the defensive forces, we would be fielding slightly less infantry than our squad scale, although it's reasonably similar. Our squad scale force mix is more than adequate, although some minor adjustments may be required. If we select all the options and transports at this scale, we have a force mix of 190 elements, which apart from the aircraft can be taken almost exclusively from the squad force mix. You just have to add a few additional ones. Using a company scale set of rules, that's 1 element equals a company, a player will need to deploy a division or equivalent. Although rarely a full strength division, a player will need a defensive infantry division and an offensive armoured division. In most cases, a player will need a divisional headquarters and from 2 to 3 regimental headquarters. You can use the same headquarter elements you had selected for a squad scale set of game, except it's rare to have the 3rd regiment or 3rd sub HQ. We can use the same aircraft force mix as the platoon scale set of rules, except I would certainly consider purchasing some 2-engine bombers in this case. They look nice. As for the artillery, we can continue to use the field artillery from our other force mixes, although it's still rare to field the 155mm gun and howitzer. For the anti-tank and anti-aircraft force mix, we can continue to use the same force mix. However, it would be rare to use all of these forces in a typical game, but you would certainly use most. At this scale, engineers are almost always used. It would be rare to have more than 3 elements, but you could go for 4 if you so desire. When we move to the tanks, we can use the platoon scale force mix for our tanks at this scale. For our attacking forces, that's our motorised forces, we can use the earlier force mix at this scale. Depending on what forces you select, the amount of motorised infantry will go down. If we look at the defensive forces, you pretty much use the same force mix as well. Should be noted, at this scale a lot of rounding will occur, which gives each player a reasonable amount of additional flexibility. If using a set of rules with strength points, you will need more elements than I've described here. But using a set of rules such as LWRS, you end up with 2 regiments of 2 battalion size elements. To be safe, you could expand this to 3 regiments of 2 battalion or 2 regiments of 3 battalion, just to cover yourself. So in conclusion, we're looking at about 130 elements. The elements required may vary a great deal depending on the rules selected, but in this example we can build up our force mix easily using the elements from our platoon scale force mix. Thus, in conclusion, if you're uncertain what scale you wish to play, then this chart will allow you to determine what to purchase, which will cover all scales of rules from squad to company. If players are aware of the rules they wish to use, then they should look at the army lists within those rules to get a more accurate force mix. And you don't need this video, but this video does give you enough flexibility to try a wide range of different rules if you think you may need to do that. And so this concludes episode 53 of my figure gaming hobby series of videos, in this case building up a French 1939 force mix. It should be noted that this also applies to a 1940 force mix. Alle guten Dingen kommen zu einem Ende.